Hello, everybody. Welcome again to Something Amazing. Kuda did mention in the previous episode that I will be back. I'm back right in the same spot, and this time we're discussing something a little bit different. We're discussing drone licenses today, and they're actually called RPAS, RPAS for short. We're going to go into definitions of what is a drone defined by the SACAA, which is the South African Civil Aviation Authority, as well as some of the like nooks and crannies. I'm just going to try and summarize everything it takes to be a drone pilot in South Africa while abiding to all the rules. Right, first up, let's start with what is an RPAS. Now, an RPAS stands for Remotely Piloted Aircraft System. Okay, that refers to everything unmanned, an aircraft that is unmanned that is being piloted from a remote station. That is not including a toy aircraft or a model aircraft. What we need to know about RPAS are some of the definitions and some of the abbreviations I would be probably throwing around later on in a couple of definitions or whatever explanation I've got. Let's start off with the most important one, which is the one to note. When you are going to get a drone license, you will be allowed to get a VLOS drone license. Now, I hope Kuda's going to put some of these definitions down here. VLOS stands for Visual Line of Sight. Now, when you guys think of that, just think of when you're flying a drone, you must actually be able to see everywhere that it's going. It must be in your field of view. Another definition is going to pop up as EVLOS, which is Extended Visual Line of Sight, as well as BVLOS, which is Beyond Visual Line of Sight. That's now when you actually can't see the drone, or the RPAS, as now we're going to call it. Right, I've been receiving a couple of questions from people that follow me on social media and stuff. If you want to follow me on social media, my handles are right below. This sounds like an advert. So people have been asking me, like, how do I get a drone license and what do I need to do a drone license? So that's what we're going to break down today. Let's start off with the steps to getting a drone license. Okay, so we're going to be discussing the steps to get a license. Firstly, you need to be 18 years of old.
You do
18 years of age. You need to have something called a Class 4 medical. Now, every single aviation license in this country, according to the South African Civil Aviation Authority, you need to have a certain class of medical. That's when you go for a medical check. They check if every nook and cranny in your body is completely efficient. So you need a minimum of a Class 4 medical, and you need something called an English language proficiency. Now, in aviation, we all have this English language proficiency, and luckily for those of you that have matric, you actually qualify for an English language proficiency automatically just by handing in your matric certificate to show that you did English as a first language. And if you don't know where your matric certificate went, you can actually just go to a school like Cranefield Aviation to go do the test, which gives you a level 6 English language proficiency. Now, this is just meant for, in aviation, we use one universal language, which is English. So they just want to make sure that before you fly an aircraft or before you fly a drone, everybody speaks English at a certain level. Right, and then you need a restricted radio license. Now, there's two types of radio licenses. One is restricted radio license, and the second one is a general radio license. The general radio license applies when you are doing your CPL, which is your commercial pilot license, to go and fly in airliners and charters and so forth. But for PPL and your RPL, which is your RPAS license, you only just need a restricted radio license. Okay, cool, and that's part of the coursework. So to start off, you need to find, number one, a school. I went to a school called Pro Wings, which is right around the corner from me, actually. It's in Calvin. Pro Wings was like one of the first schools to do the RPAS license. And there's 2 phases of training. And literally, getting a drone license only takes about 7 days. You might have clicked on this video, and the one question you might be asking yourself, why is this guy wearing pilot uniform, man, to come and just talk about drones? No one flies drones just like this, otherwise you're just an eager beaver.
Everybody come along, eager beavers for the Lord. We're on our way to heaven. We hope you'll come aboard. Yes, we are the eager beavers, eager
So I am dressed like this because I actually do hold a PPL, which is a private pilot license, but I also hold an RPL, which is an RPAS license. Remember we discussed earlier on that RPAS is remotely piloted aircraft system. So any unmanned aircraft that goes into the air that's piloted from a remote station, that is an RPAS. So that's exactly what an RPAS looks like. The PPL one, I don't know why I've chucked it, but that one is brown. They all have different colors. So the next part we move on to is something I've just dubbed now, the flying experience needed to get an RPL or a drone license. So do you need flying experience? Absolutely not. So there's people that have been flying drones for so long in their lives or flying model aircrafts for so long in their lives that before the laws came into effect, they were already flying these things commercially. So they pop in as well to get a license and also abide to some of the regulations as set about by the South African Civil Aviation Authority. But you at home, sitting right there right now, that has never even touched a drone ever in your life, you can literally go to school and start your lessons tomorrow. Cool. Do you have to own your own drone? No, you do not. Although it is beneficial to hold, to have your own drone because it helps you get the feel. I mean, having your own drone first and flying it illegally at home. We'll get into why it's illegal later on. And flying it illegally at home, it gets you into it puts you a step ahead into the practical flying of the actual drone because you will be tested with an actual drone in the actual air with you flying it. All right, another thing we need to move on to is something called fly zones. Now, when I mentioned earlier on that some of these things actually are illegal, there are so many regulations that you need to abide by when you buy one of these bad boys that I would advise every single person to get an RPL before you start flying drones. Before I carry on with that, I'll explain that there's two ways to own a drone, right? The first way is when you own a drone and you're flying it privately. Now, this means flying it at your own home and not for commercial reasons, okay? And the second way is when you want to, say you're in film and photography or you're surveying on mines and stuff, that's when you actually need an RPL with something called an ROC. Now, that is a license that will let you operate the RPAS commercially, ROC. All right, just on a by note, I want you guys to realize that this video goes according to my understanding of the South African Civil Aviation Authorities. Please make sure you do familiarize yourselves with all the cats and cars, the Civil Aviation Authority regulations, as well as the technical standards involved in RPAS or RPL training. Do not just take my word for it. Please make sure you double check, as I cannot be held legally liable for any information you might have taken in here and gotten in trouble for. Fly zones. Now, what are fly zones? Fly zones are actual areas where you are allowed or not allowed to fly. All right, so when it comes to places where you're not allowed to fly, whether you're doing this as a hobby or for commercial reasons, they are termed FAD, which is your danger zones, FAR, which are your restricted fly zones, and FAP, which are your prohibited fly zones. You're not allowed to fly in any of those at all. So basically, if you have an aviation map, you can actually see the designated areas where you're not allowed to fly. So prohibited areas actually include as well national key points and places like police stations or courts of law and so forth. Those are all prohibited areas. Restricted areas will be more like your nuclear regions where there's actual nuclear plants and so forth. And then your danger areas will be actually places where there's flight training happening. So as we are in Joburg, as I'm recording this, there's actually quite a lot of danger areas because there's so many flight schools in and around Johannesburg that all these areas where they have to go practice the actual flying in actual aircrafts are termed danger zones. The last very important question that people always ask is, what does it cost to get such a license? We'll go into all the other licenses in the next few videos on the viewing deck. But what I can tell you is that this bad boy costs about 30,000 Rand, estimated to max 30,000 Rand. Now, I mentioned earlier on that it takes 7 days, but if you are the holder of a PPL or a CPL, which is a commercial pilot license, or an ATPL, which is an airline transport pilot license, you actually get to cut the course in half because you don't have to go and do all the other theory that people are doing, especially for, if you're in aviation, you know the law already, you've written the exams already. So if you have a PPL or a CPL or an ATPL, the course actually can take you as little as 3 days just for the theory, and then you let go of all the other theory that you need to learn because they're under the assumption that you hold a pilot license, so you do know that theory. So that'll be a bit less of a cost. It'll probably cost you about 20 something. But from get-go, straight from scratch, it's about 30,000 Rand. So yeah, that's about it. Let me know if there's any other questions that I can answer. I'll do a quick recap of what we just discussed today. So we discussed the definition of an RPAS. We discussed the ways to get a license. We discussed whether you need a flying experience or not. We discussed whether you need your own drone or not. Then we went on to discuss the fly zones. And lastly, we dealt with the costs involved. And that's it from me. I go by the name Lasang T. This has been a special episode of Something Amazing. Look down below. I might start a channel and I'm going to call it The Viewing Deck.
Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. Subscribe to this channel, Something Amazing, always bringing you amazing things.
Bye.